Her father raised his glass before she had even sat down and told the table she would marry the banker's son by spring. Rachel Colton stood in the doorway of her own dining room, a stack of plates in her hands that she'd carried in because the kitchen was short-handed, and heard her future decided over roast beef. Her father set his glass down and looked down the table at Edwin Voss, who wore a suit too fine for a ranch supper. "Your father and I have spoken twice this month. We'll announce it proper at the engagement party. Spring sale ought to put us in good shape for a wedding after." Edwin smiled the way a man smiles when a deal has closed. He did not look at Rachel. He looked at her father. He turned to her at last, still smiling. "You'll want for nothing, Rachel. Once we're married, you won't need to trouble yourself with cattle accounts." The plates were heavy in her hands. She set them down at the sideboard so they would not shake. At the far end of the room, near the kitchen door, a hired man she did not know stood with a water pitcher, called in from the barn because supper had more guests than the kitchen expected. Tall, sun-marked, maybe 30. He did not smile at the announcement. He set the pitcher down without a sound and stepped back through the kitchen door before anyone noticed he had gone. He was the only person who understood what had just happened to her. Rachel excused herself before dessert. No one stopped her. Her father was already talking bloodlines and credit with Edwin's father, and her sister Della caught her eye across the table with a look that meant, "I saw that too." Outside, lamplight spilled from the barn. She walked toward it without deciding to. The hired man was inside, checking a mare's leg by lantern light. He heard her boots on the packed dirt and straightened but did not come toward her. He bent again over the mare's foreleg without turning. "Ma'am." She stayed near the stall door, arms wrapped against the cold. "You were in the dining room. You didn't stay for the toast." He looked up at her then. Nothing performed in his face. "Ma'am, I won't congratulate you on a thing you didn't choose." She wrapped her arms tighter, and something in her chest that had been clenched since the toast came a little loose. She held out her hand toward the lantern light between them. "I don't believe I caught your name." He wiped his palm once on his trousers before he took it. "Sam Reeve. Foreman hired me on for calving and fence work 3 weeks back." Then he bent again to the mare's leg, checking the swelling under his thumb, not looking up at her again. He did not press. He did not ask her to stay. He went back to his work like she had never come out at all, and somehow that steadiness was the thing that let her breathe. By the second week of the engagement, Rachel had found reasons to be at the working end of the ranch more than the house. She told her father it was to keep busy before the wedding. What she did not tell him was that she had corrected the foreman's tallies since she was 16, and nobody in that house had ever treated her figures as anything more than a young woman's habit. Edwin rode out once that week to walk the porch with her, hat under his arm, talking of curtains and a house in town near his father's bank. He did not ask what she thought of the ranch ledgers, though she'd been carrying one under her arm when he arrived. He set his hand briefly over hers on the rail, more claim than affection, and told her the wedding date would suit the bank's spring calendar better than her father's. She slipped her hand free before he noticed and said the ranch needed her at the north fence that afternoon. He did not offer to come. She held the ledger out over the fence rail the next morning. "Your count's off on the north pasture. Foreman's got 40 head. I make it 36. Sam took the ledger, looked at her figures, then swung up onto his horse. "Let's see which of us is wrong." They found 36. He did not praise her like she had performed a trick. He handed the ledger back as if the figures had belonged to her all along. "You ought to be running these books instead of checking another man's arithmetic." He He rode on to the next fence line, and the compliment landed harder than any speech Edwin Voss had made in a month. She started finding him at the calving shed most mornings after that, not by arrangement, just because the work was there. And she went where the work was. He handed her a lantern when she needed one, and asked her opinion on a breech calf's positioning, like her answer mattered. One dawn, wrist deep in the business of turning a calf, he glanced up at her. "You've done this before." She braced her boot against the stall rail, holding the calf's hind leg steady. "Since I was 12, my father used to say I had better hands for it than any man he'd hired. Then I got old enough to marry off, and he stopped saying it." Sam didn't look up from the calf. "Doesn't make it less true." She noticed he worked the same at 3 in the morning with no witness but her as he did at noon with the crew watching. Kindness could be performed. This couldn't. He noticed things about her, too, that she took her coffee black, that she wrote her tallies left-handed and smudged the ink. One night the calf came breech and stubborn, and by the time it was down and breathing, both of them were filthy to the elbow and past caring who saw. Sam sat back against the stall wall, spent, and Rachel sat beside him without thinking twice about the distance between them. She wiped her hands on a length of burlap, not quite joking. Edwin would faint dead away in here. Sam didn't move his arm from where it rested near hers. Edwin's never had reason to learn. Man like that only knows what a ranch is worth on paper. She turned her head toward him, close enough now that the lantern light caught both their faces. "And you?" He got to his feet before he answered, brushing straw from his knees. "I know what it costs to keep one standing." He reached a hand down to help her up and let go of it the moment she had her balance, careful in a way that told her exactly how carefully he was choosing not to hold on longer than he should. Her father noticed the pattern before she did. He watched from the porch, arms crossed, the way he watched cattle he wasn't sure of. Then he began to test the man. He gave Sam the washed-out fence line on the ridge 2 days before a storm was due, with no word of extra pay. Sam had it standing by dusk, and when the foreman offered him credit in front of the crew, Sam said, "Wasn't just me. Cole did the heavy postwork," and walked off before anyone could make more of it. The storm broke that night, a gate downstream failed, and Sam was back out before anyone asked, soaked through, bringing every last steer home by sunrise. Rachel found him at the trough afterward and handed him coffee without a word about it being brave. Her father tried money next. He left the wage pouch in the tack room where Sam had been sent to fetch the wage book, the count made heavy and easy to pocket. Sam brought both to the house before supper and held them out across the porch rail. "Count's wrong here, sir. Short 2 men's wages and long on mine." Her father took it back slow, studying his face. "You didn't think to keep the difference quiet?" Sam kept his hands loose at his sides, weight settled back on his heels. "Wasn't mine to keep quiet." Her father turned the pouch over in his hands like it had told him something he hadn't wanted to hear, and let the matter drop. Around the yard that week, he watched Sam differently. Less like a man waiting for a mistake, more like a man waiting to be proven wrong. The third test came dressed as ranch business. Her father sent them together because Rachel knew the old survey markers, and Sam was the hand assigned to reset the stakes, a full afternoon with no chaperone but the fence itself. Near the creek crossing, Rachel let more slip than she'd meant to, eyes on the water rather than on him. "I used to think I'd run this ranch myself one day, before Edwin, before any of it. Sounds foolish now." He kept his hands on the reins, didn't move closer. "Doesn't sound foolish to me. Don't say anything today you might have to pay for tomorrow, Miss Colton. Man like me isn't the one you ought to be confessing that to." It stung and it steadied her, both at once. He wasn't refusing her. He was refusing to let her father's fear become the reason she got hurt. The last test was the one that mattered. Her father called Sam to the porch alone, Della watching through the kitchen window. Her father stood at the porch rail, not offering him a chair. "There's good work 2 counties over, fair pay, a letter of recommendation from me personally. All you'd need to do is be gone before the engagement party." Sam let the offer sit a moment before he answered. "Your daughter can send me away, Mr. Colton. You can't buy me away." Her father's jaw worked, but something in his eyes changed. Della, still watching from the window, later called it the first time she'd seen the old man look at a hired hand the way he looked at a man he respected. He didn't speak to Sam again that evening, only stood at the rail a long while after Sam had walked back toward the bunkhouse. Word of it reached Rachel by supper, carried by Della in a whisper over the washing basin. Della dried a plate slowly, not looking up. "You look like yourself when he talks to you. You haven't looked like yourself since the night of that toast." Rachel found Sam at the stable 2 nights later, his bedroll already packed, his pay envelope sitting unopened on the foreman's desk. She stayed by the stall door, one hand on the rough board. "You were going to leave without a word." He pulled the bedroll strap tight before he looked at her. "I was leaving before they made you ashamed of knowing me." His face had none of its usual steadiness. "Town's got a way of making that ugly, whether it is or isn't." She let go of the stall board and crossed the space between them. "I was never ashamed of you." He looked at her long enough that it would have been easy, forgivable even, to reach for her. He didn't. He set the bedroll down instead and held her eyes rather than the door. "I won't ask you to choose me while your father's still choosing for you. That's not a choice. That's just trading one man's plan for another." He didn't leave that night. The banker's son heard about the boundary ride in the stable within the week. He came to the house and spoke to her father in the study, door half shut, and Rachel heard enough through the gap. The spring renewal, how a banker's patience could shorten if a family's name got tangled with a hired hand. Her father came out of that study older than he'd gone in. The engagement party filled the house 2 weeks later, the Voss family seated near the fire like royalty granted an audience. Edwin rose, glass raised. He lifted his glass high enough for the room to see. "To the joining of 2 fine families, of land, of credit, and of—" Rachel stood before he could finish. "I will not marry a man who wants the ranch more than he wants me." The room went still enough to hear the fire. Edwin's smile thinned. "Are you meaning to shame your father in his own house?" Every eye found her father. He could have silenced her, laughed it off, saved the deal with a sentence. Instead, he set his glass down on the mantel, slow and deliberate. "My daughter has spoken." Near the doorway, Sam stood with the other hands who had been brought in to carry the extra chairs and keep the lamps filled. He did not step forward. He waited until Rachel looked at him before he crossed the room. He stopped an arm's length from her, hat still in hand. "I have nothing to offer equal to this ranch." She met his eyes in front of the whole room. "I didn't ask for equal. I asked for honest." Edwin's father rose, muttered something curt about withdrawing the spring renewal, and left with his son within the hour. Her father watched them go from the porch, and for the first time in weeks, he did not look like a man counting what he'd lost. The next morning, Sam was in the east corral before sunup, driving nails into a broken gate rail as if the party had belonged to somebody else. He had not come to the house for breakfast. He had not asked her father for a word. He worked with his coat off and his sleeves rolled, the hammer moving with the same hard patience he'd given every job before anyone in that house knew his name. Rachel found him there with the ledger under one arm. She set it open on the top rail. Voss's father sent a note before dawn. The spring renewal is gone. Sam set the hammer down before he answered. Rachel turned the ledger toward him, feed column facing out. The smart thing would be to pretend I lost my nerve last night. Spare everyone the trouble. He looked at the figures before he looked at her. Then that is still yours to do. No pleading in it, no claim staked. That nearly undid her. She kept her hand flat on the page before he could turn, leaving into something noble. Do not hand me back my choice, just because it got expensive. Near the pump across the yard, her father had stopped with one hand on the handle, listening without pretending not to. Sam picked the hammer back up, then set it down again. I can stand beside you through a hard spring. Rachel closed the ledger over her thumb, marking the page. Then start there. Her father crossed the yard slow, taking in the broken gate, the ledger, the two of them standing on either side of the rail like a line being measured. June. He kept his eyes on Sam. If he can stand through spring and still let her choose, he can stand at the cottonwoods in June. Sam took his hat off. Rachel waited until her father had walked off before she let herself smile. Then she opened the ledger again, took up the pencil, and wrote June in the margin beside the loan figures. Small enough no banker passing through would know what it meant, plain enough that Sam did. They married in June under the cottonwoods, Della standing up for her, the hands crowded near the fence line to watch. Her father gave her away steadier than anyone who'd watched him grieve the banker's terms all spring would have guessed he could be. The credit tightened exactly as the Voss family had promised. Feed prices climbed, the note on the herd came due sooner than planned, and no fresh credit came easy from the only bank in 3 counties. Rachel and Sam sat in the same room where her engagement had once been announced, the ledger open between them. Rachel kept the pen in hand, tapping it once against the page. We sell the yearlings early, before the market softens. Hold the breeding stock through. Sam set his hat on the table corner. And we leave the west section alone this year. Fix the water line instead. Losing less matters more than gaining more right now. Her father stood in the doorway, listening rather than deciding, which was new for him. That's not how I'd have done it. Sam didn't look up from the ledger. No, sir. It's how we're doing it. The old man almost smiled. He let them. By autumn, the note was paid down ahead of schedule, the water line fixed before the first hard frost. A rancher stopped her father outside the feed store to say the Colton place had come through the tight season better than most. Wasn't that something? A ranch run by a girl and a hired hand. Her father didn't correct the word hired with any speech. He only said his son-in-law knew land better than most men born to it, and his daughter kept better books than any banker he'd known. At home, the proof was quieter. 2 cups sat by the stove most mornings instead of 1. The coffee strong and black the way Rachel liked it, because Sam made it before she woke now instead of after. The chair beside Rachel at the supper table filled with Sam most nights, and nobody remarked on it because by then it didn't need remarking. Della visited that winter with her new husband, a schoolteacher from the next county, and found Rachel and Sam bent over the ledger together in the same room where the engagement toast had once been raised. Della set her gloves down on the sideboard, watched a moment before either of them noticed her, and this time it wasn't a question. You look like yourself. Rachel didn't look up from the column of figures. I know it. Their first child came the following spring, born in the same house where the engagement toast had been raised. Her father held the baby on the porch the first warm evening, awkward in his big hands, and wept without a sound when he thought no one was watching. Years turned over the way ranch years do. A second child came, then a third, learning to sit a horse before they could properly read. Sam became foreman first, then partner in fact, if not yet in name, the man the hands looked to when weather turned hard. Her father grew slower and quieter with each season, content in a way Rachel had not seen since before her mother died. On one of the last warm nights before winter, he sat on the porch with his youngest grandchild on his knee, watching Rachel and Sam in the yard below argue mildly over a cattle count neither would quite concede, both of them half laughing because both were partly right. The ledger lay open on the rail beside him, her handwriting on one page, Sam's on the facing one. He turned the ledger's corner between two fingers, mostly speaking to the child. "I thought I was saving this place when I picked bank money." The child tugged once at his sleeve, waiting. "What happened, Grandpa?" He watched his daughter look up and find her husband's eyes across the yard. He closed his hand over the ledger's edge. "Your mother picked better." He closed the ledger, set it on his lap, and watched the dust rise gold in the last light as the children ran through the yard and the cattle called from the near pasture, the ranch larger and steadier than it had ever been under his hand alone.